The book of Exodus in the Bible is a tale of Moses leading God's chosen people, the Israelites, from captivity out of Egypt, escaping the past and going on and seeking the Holy Land. Most of us know that story to some degree, but what I want to tell you is that it is probably a very easy to see monomyth structure in there. And what I want to do in this video is just point out the first part of it. I want to keep the video short. I think they're long and they're hard to see. I've been wrapped up in things that are kind of complicated and I think pretty boring. In this video, I'm just going to jump to here. Here's Moses. Here's these steps. Here's the calling. Here's the denial of the call. Here's the supernatural aid. Here is the crossing of the threshold. And I'm going to make cross comparisons with a Greek myth, the Argonautica, just to show how conceptually two stories that sound radically different from each other can nevertheless be observed as following the same pattern of some sort of sequence in the background. That's what we're going to look for here. We're going to have to read them conceptually, but we'll get into that as I move along. I'm going to try to keep it short, but first, let's do this. The template, the hero's journey template. Do you know what that is? My name is Dan Paulson, and let's get into it. Okay, first of all, this is what the monomyth is, and I'm using a term that comes from a book from Joseph Campbell called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And I'm not recommending you go get this book. There's other, unless you're interested in mythology and reading this kind of stuff. As far as looking for the template, I find that it isn't all that helpful, actually, you really have to go at this independently. And that's what mostly I have done. Later on, somebody pointed out that what I was doing was following Joseph Campbell's work. And I realized that that is the case. I'm seeing the same patterns that he's seeing. Here's what happened, though, is he saw it so prevalently in so much material that he decided to note it down. It was like, here's something that in the front of these stories that's happening. There's an individual that is somehow called. They are singled out and brought out, and often they can't. They deny the call. There's something that is happening so prevalently that he realizes that that's a stage in there, and that there's a calling, that there's a denial of the call. From that point on, they're usually off in some kind of a situation where they're getting training, or he called it supernatural aid. In the stories, in like religious stories, they go up to a mountain to see God. We're going to talk about that one in this one here. Anyway, he's observing those patterns in there. The crossing of a threshold. You're going through clashing rocks, sailing across the river Styx, going through the Red Sea. He's realizing that even those sound different as elements, what he realizes at some point conceptually is, wow, it's like somebody's called. It's specified. They're going on this journey. They're going through some kind of a barrier. There's a threshold there. He sees that and he begins creating a template from that. And that is what we're on. We're going to get closer into it. There is a template there that is based on, in my estimation, it's based on the human life cycle, that is actually what that template comes from. And there's a little bit more to it than what he identified. Okay, let's look at his steps first to begin with. And I'm only going to do the first part of them. His stayed very obscure. The verbiage stayed very obscure. And I want to make it very interactive, something you can look at and go, okay, I get what that means. Not something that sounds mystical and mysterious that you have to figure out. Oh, first, though, this may seem silly, but think about this for a second. Star Wars, that was built on the same template. Luke Skywalker, he's called. He gets the droids. He sees the images. He wants to go. Yeah, he's called. He's the hero in the journey. He goes to leave. He talks to his uncle who says, nope, you can't go. Yeah, you're going to have to wait. We got harvest coming in at the end of the year. We're shorthanded. We've got problems. So there's a calling and there's a denial of the call happening right there. Then things change that allows him to go. There's a point where there's a supernatural training. He goes to he meets up with Yoda to Dagobah to get his supernatural training. Anyway, the story elements are there as well. You would see them there, and I want you to understand how prevalent this is. I don't think everybody knows what it is. that it is a common template that's like, oh, that's a fun thing to use. We attach with it because it's our life cycle. It's our life sequence. Okay, and I don't want to spend a lot of time covering his monomyth again. We've got a 17 stages, what he wrote to begin with. And this goes in a circle. This is a cycle that we have to take. It's a cycle of life and healing ultimately. But the story follows this pattern that there's a call to adventure at the upper left, then there's a refusal of the call, then we get supernatural aid, then there's a crossing of the first threshold. We go into belly of the whale. We see road of trials, meeting with the goddess, temptation, atonement with the Father, apotheosis, the ultimate boon, the refusal of the return, magic flight, rescue from without, crossing the return threshold, master of two worlds, and freedom to live. That is his complete cycle. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab just the first section right there, the separation. Call to adventure, refusal of the call, supernatural aid, and the crossing of the first threshold. Let me relist that down here, and we're going to go find those in the story of Moses and in the story of Jason and the Argonauts. Let's do that right now. All right, you see, I've just grabbed those first 5 steps there. The call to adventure, refusal of the call, supernatural aid, crossing the first threshold, and the belly of the whale. Okay, let's just talk through this. And because this is going to be short and brief, honestly, there's an expectation that you're already familiar with it. I'm not going to go grab verses and post them up and do all that kind of stuff or read from the Bible. That'll just take too long. We already know these stories, don't we? If we're on board, we're kind of exploring this stuff. We have a good idea of what the story is. And if you hear this and go, oh, I want to look into that more, then just go read it. You're going to want to anyway. That'll be the way to do it. Okay, so first of all, the calling. There's actually 3 things that we see happening at one point in time. Early in the story, we see Moses being guided to Mount Horeb. So this is an elevated place. This is going to feature. He's at an elevated place, and there he runs into the burning bush and talks to God. God even tells him, take your shoes off, and you're on holy ground. But there, in the midst of this, this conversation is going on. There's supernatural aid happening. Moses is talking to God. At the same time, the calling is happening when God is telling him, you're going to lead my people out. And then the refusal when Moses says, no, I can't even speak right. They're not going to pay attention to me. So right there, we've got our supernatural aid, and we've got our calling and the refusal of the call right there. All 3 of those happening. Then we move on to crossing of the first threshold. What happens when they leave? When they leave, they have to cross the Red Sea, and they have to invoke God's help to cross the Red Sea. Okay, those elements are right there in the story. Now, the next part, this Jason and the Argonauts, I've been using the Hollywood movie one. I found pieces of it online. It's copyrighted, so I can't. I've tried copying it before and posting it, and I get copyright hits on it, so I can't do it. And it's not the best one to use, honestly, except that it's really available. You can just pull it up on your phone and watch an old movie. Jason is the one that is the called one in this story. In the story of Exodus, it's Moses, right? And remembering, if you go on the hero's journey, that's going to be you. We'll talk about that in a minute. But these are the same person. They're in different stories, but they all represent the same person going on this same type of a journey. So what we have is he's taken up to Mount Olympus to talk to Zeus, and Hera is going to be allowed to help him. So we've got that same sort of thing happening, going up to an elevated place and talking to a higher being. From Mount Horeb for Moses and Mount Olympus for Jason. The crossing of the threshold is going to happen as they go sail through the clashing rocks and barely make it. So that the elements, when you look at them, if you look at the story, they sound radically different. If you step back and say there's something conceptually hidden in those stories, and those patterns are there that sometimes they're hard to see, other times they're kind of easy to see. That's what gets you looking and trying to figure out what's going on, though. They've basically taken that human steps. Here's the steps of your life from start to finish. Flip it from inside your experience to outside and create an outward-looking story on it. At any point in time, it actually plays out inward. But the ways that the stories are held are where all the radical differences are. Right here, we can see that there's a Greek myth, and, Exodus is right there on it. Okay, what's missing? There are some elements that in very complete monomyths that are there. We have a calling right here, but before there's a calling, what is happening? Remember in the beginning, Moses is put in a basket and saved in the Nile. He's saved at birth. He is specially isolated out. So there's a step before the calling here. There's a special isolation early on in infancy. We're going to see this in Jesus. Jason and the Argonauts, King Pelias, who represents his earlier self, wants to take over, wants to kill him as a child, but he's not allowed to. And he's even told something very cryptic. If you kill Jason, you kill yourself. How could that be? Yeah, they're all us. We are all the parts of the story. And there's clues in there, but they're very cryptic. There's only one way that they fit, that they would work. And just mentally playing them out will get you there. Okay, so we've got that happening. Then what else happens? We have, not only is Moses isolated out, but there is also something happening that is very prevalent in the stories. It's typically a part of the creation myth, but in a standalone story, you have to include it. Exodus came around word of mouth. You have to put all of the elements in there that are necessary to understand how the story works. So you have to put cyclical pain in there. So we're going to see that when they're in Egypt, they're trapped. Pharaoh represents your old self that you wrestle with. You're growing up. You're attached to the world. You're attached to the physical. The good part of you has become a slave to your old part. They're analogous representations of the life of a human. The Argonautica works the same way. If you were to go look at that story where Jason is going back to defeat King Pelias to get his territory back, that is conceptually the same story. King Pelias represents our early self, and in the Jewish myth, Pharaoh represents our early self. Both of them that don't want to give us freedom, that we have to escape from our early life. Okay, and this is how the stories can sound so different, yet still conceptually be the same thing. And in one case, like with Moses and Pharaoh, the idea is that I must escape my past. And you turn it around and look at it in the Argonautica, and the difference is you must defeat your past. In either case, what does that mean mentally? That you have disengaged from the past. So even though they sound differently conceptually, once you take out all of the analogs and put them where they belong in the psyche, they're going to do the same thing. They're about letting go of our beginnings and letting go of the hurt and the pain. But then it's going to go on and teach us how to do that. This is just a setup. The plagues represent the things that continue to come back and hurt you over and over again. You can't escape them. These are the things that we hold on to that are, look at your life. Yeah, there's things that I have from my past that I'd like to leave in the past, but somehow they keep acting out over and over again. Those are the plagues right there. Then trying to leave, but you can't. Pharaoh says you can go, then changes his mind, says you can go, then changes his mind. Think of your life and trying to make the changes. The wrestle to leave. I got to go. I got to get out of this. I can't. I'm back into it. I can't get on my own. I have to get on my own. I can't be here. I've got to get out of here. This wrestle, this struggle that's going on right here is represented in the idea that God himself is saying, here, go do this, to tell him to let you go. Then God hardens his heart so that he won't even let you do it. God's playing this role back and forth. Go for it. Tell him you'll do this. Oh, I'm going to make him so incensed that he won't let you go anyway. How would that make sense if God is doing that? It doesn't make sense unless that's really what is happening in life, and these are analogous representations of just the higher being and the self. Anyway, all of that. Okay, so we have repeated cycles of failure. That's the reason you go on the journey. That has to be there. Joseph Campbell did not identify that. So we've got three things to add right there. Number one, isolation. Very few people are going to be, many are called, few are chosen, many carry the ark, few see inside. All those are a part of the process. This isn't for everybody, is what it's saying. And there's something early on at birth that dictates kind of something about the way you are. They're chosen, but that's not it. It's personality type or something of that nature, the way your mind functions over others, the experiences we have in life. It's a filtration process of that's just natural, as far as I can tell. it's a mental process. You figure it out. Okay, so we had the special selection. Then there's the repeated cycles of pain that continue to come around, and then there is a difficulty in leaving the past behind. Those are going to be added in. So let's put those in right here. I would also like to say that there can be variations in some areas, but not necessarily all. You can see that supernatural aid and the calling and the refusal of the call were all combined with Moses there, weren't they? If you were to go through the Greek myth, you'll find something that is different. There's a variation there. There's a calling, there is supernatural aid, but there is not a refusal of the call. So the stories can be written in such a way that the person says, yeah, I'm just going back after it. I don't care. Or it could be somebody saying, yeah, I'm reluctant. I don't want to. I'm fearing that, which is actually probably more common in us. However, both of the stories are going to show cyclical pain. We've got the plagues coming in Egypt in Pharaoh with Moses. If we were to look at the TV version of the Argonautica, we would see what the Greeks are using. It's something that's happening. These creatures that are defiling food from somebody called Phineas. And in the story, all of these parts represent us. So Phineas represents a part of our earlier self that could see. Phineas knew what to do, but Phineas is going to be left behind. Phineas even has a comment one time, Zeus, I sinned once. Why do you punish me every day? What does that sound like? We're bringing stuff with us that's cycling in hurt. And the harpies are coming down and defiling his food. He wants to eat. He's miserable. His life is being destroyed. They have to cage those creatures. They can't, Zeus doesn't allow them to be killed. So they have to be trapped. And basically what this means is that these are memories that we have of the things that we're carrying with us that are the painful cyclical things. And that once we've resolved them, they are caged essentially. The memory is still there. However, its impact on hurting us ceases to be there. So that's how that one works. So we're still seeing cyclical pain. They try to leave an old island, the island of the old gods, representing the past. Hercules tries to bring something with them. The old god comes after them and wipes them out. This represents trying to bring something from your past. You can't do it. This is a struggle to move ahead and leave things in the past. The story elements vary slightly, but not very much. They sound radically different, but at the core, they're the same template. Do you see that? Okay, so let's look at it again. We see number 1 here, selection, isolated. Moses was in the basket, repeated cycles of pain. This is later on in the story. We've got the plagues continuing to come after Pharaoh, but Pharaoh won't let them go. Yes, you can go. No, you can't. Yes, you can. No, you can't. Then there's the call to adventure, supernatural aid, and refusal all at once, where God is talking to Moses at the burning bush, at the high elevated place, telling him, you must come. And he's like, I can't go. But God is going to help him. Difficult to leave the past behind. This struggle, Pharaoh finally says go, and then comes after him and chases after him. Crossing the first threshold, they get to the Red Sea. Boom, there they go, they cross. Belly of the whale, you have just entered your own mind. This is where the adventure has to be played out. Does that sound fun? Let's do the same thing for the Argonautica then. Selection. So we see that Jason was saved at birth when King Pelias wanted to kill him. He was not allowed to. Repeated cycles of pain. We see that emerge as the harpies are continually coming down and wiping out the food for Phineas and ruining his life. The call to adventure and supernatural aid happens as Jason decides he is going to go, and he is brought up to Mount Olympus to talk to Zeus and get the aid of Hera 5 times. Difficult to leave the past behind. They try to sail away the island from the past, the island of the old gods, which comes after them and wipes them out. They finally leave, but only after ensuring that they've left it all in the past. Crossing the first threshold, they now must go through the clashing rocks, which just about wipes them out. They barely make it through. Does that sound like Exodus? All right, now in my own plain language way of looking at this, selection I'm not going to be a common person. I'm going to do it because I'm tired of the stuff that keeps happening in my life that I can't manage anymore. I finally realize it's a part of me. The call to adventure means I'm ready to turn inward. The refusal of the call means, oh my God, I've got to go face all of the things I don't want to face. My shame, my pain, my hatred, my anger. The only way to heal them is to face them. Do I want to do that? No. Do I need supernatural aid? Yes. There's not really supernatural. It comes out in the story that way, but what there is the understanding that this is a self-healing process, that there are mental processes that came about in our lives that made us what we are, and we need to use mental processes to interact with those memories in order to change them, which changes the way we feel emotionally and changes the way we live our life. That's the supernatural aid. It's knowing what to do. Difficult to leave the past behind. Yeah, we are just dragging stuff with us. What do you have to do? Are you in an environment that you're stuck in, that is hurtful, but you can't leave it? You rely upon it for your life. This could be incredibly just difficult. It could also be habits. I need to leave drugs and alcohol behind, and I almost make it, and then I fall back. Any number of things, relationships or some sort of habits, something that we're having a difficult time leaving behind. That's a normal part of life that would sequence this way. But when we're ready to go, and when we do, the crossing of the first threshold is turning inward to our minds. That is looking inward. In the belly of the whale, that is going to be being inside of the mind. Now, there's more up ahead. There's more to the story, but that's the way it shakes out at this point as far as I see it. And the reason I've been able to finally extrapolate what I believe the template is from all of the different material was looking to see if they fit on that same type of sequence of the way that the human life works. And it lines up all the time. Okay. That's what I wanted to say here, and I wanted to try to make it short enough that it would be something that would be viewable. I struggle with how to get attention with what I have going on. But there's a depth to it that's very hard to see, and I think that the videos are such that people look at them and that within a few minutes are like clicking off going, I have no idea what this guy's babbling on about. These are deep. They're incredibly deep, and that's all there is to it. In this part, I don't want to make any suggestions. I just invite you to listen to it. This is all during Roman era. Jesus is called as the Son of God, has supernatural powers, and instructs us to seek the kingdom of heaven within. King Arthur was called as the only one who could extract Excalibur, had Merlin for supernatural powers, and seeks the Holy Grail. Jesus had the disciples, and Arthur had the Knights of the Round Table. See concepts. These were made in a time when this is what they did all day long. Yeah, these stories, all day long. What do you think they did? Think about that. Think about life back then. I got nothing to do. There's no electricity. There's no World Wide Web. I got nobody to talk to because I'm watching my sheep or, doing something. Dyeing cloth, making pottery. I guess you'd have the coworkers to talk to. That would be your life. Don't you think these stories would be incredibly rich? They're made with something inside of there. There was some clever people back then doing things that we're missing today. All right. Hope it was fun. Love one another. See you in the next video.